Welcome to the Week 2 edition of the weekly supplement, from our studio somewhere on the third line. This week's action features a full slate of games and some high drama. I'm Hawkeye the sports guy, and a warm welcome you baseball fans.
And I am a happy O'Day and praise Jesus.
What? What did you say?
I said praise Jesus. Is that a problem?
Well, no. I'm just surprised. You don't strike me as the born-again type.
Oh? Actually, I'm not. I'm just repeating what your mother was screaming in my ear last night.
You're a disgusting and vile man. Well, the early game on Monday was a terrific match. The Rusty Rebels evened their record with a tidy 14-9 win over the Banshees. There were a number of guys who had a good game for the Rebels, but none more so than Jeff Keogh, who was off to an 8-for-8 start to the season. Billy Cluche and Stephen Kapp were also perfect at the plate. The Banshees scored first, and Scott Peters had 4 hits and 4 at-bats. But the Rebels were relentless and consistent, scoring in every inning for their win.
In the late game on Monday, the Grizzlies played the Wild. Actually, I don't know if you can use the word play when you lose 24-3. Chris Bergen was the only guy on the Wild not to have 3 or more hits. Don't feel bad for him though. He still had 2 hits and scored 2 runs. Darryl Godet led the way with 5 hits in 5 at-bats while pitching a great game. It was a slow start for the Grizzlies, who had 4 players with 1 or no hits and 3 players missing. Thank God, or praise Jesus, if you will, for their rookies, who were a combined 5 for 8. It will be interesting to find out whether the Wild are really this good or if the Grizzlies are really that bad.
Moving to Tuesday. 2 unbeaten teams faced off in the torn ligament and the dusty cleats. It's not too often that your leadoff hitter only gets 3 at-bats, but the cleats pitching and defense was on fire. One guy who played well for the ligaments was Dave McKendrick, who has yet to make an out this season. For the 2-0 cleats, the heroes are many. Scotty, Rob and Brett were all 5 for 5. John, Polly and Craig were all 4 for 4. And Scotty and Rob both scored 5 runs each. These cleats are hitting like crazy and having a ball.
Praise Jesus.
Would you please stop?
Amen. The Dodge City Rounders and the Hurtin units also squared off on Tuesday. At the end of 2 innings, the Rounders were down 11-2. Unlike some other teams that found themselves in a hole, this team showed some real character. They shut out the units in the 3rd, 4th and 5th innings, but ultimately fell 16-11. The offense was spread for the units with a number of 3-hit games. Mike Oliff and Hawaii's own Calvin Stevesy went 4-4. The Rounders had Time Schrank and Aji Matson with perfect nights.
The next game was the Beer Brothers and the Red Dogs. Wow, what can you say about the Beer Brothers?
You can say that team is loaded.
Now, everyone had the same draft. The final score of this game was 22-5 for the Beer Brothers.
That is a bad score. Not as bad as the Grizzlies, but still pretty bad.
Steve Rouse and Mark Doyle both went 5 for 5, and every player on the Beer Brothers scored at least 1 run and had at least 3 hits. What a night. The Red Dogs were severely handicapped as they were missing Matt and Lynn Forrester and Mike Candy. That is a lot of hits to lose for one night.
The next game is the Hot Tub Woodies and the Rusty Rebels.
No, wait a minute. Shouldn't the next one be the Lucky Stiffs and the Dislocated Joints? I'm sure they would like to hear their names and some info.
Well, for us to report, we need a game sheet. No game sheet, no update. It would seem that the reported demise of the Hot Tub Woodies franchise was just a date premature. After being destroyed in their first game, the Woodies came to play. They held a 3-0 lead after the first inning, and the game was tied at 5 after 3. The Rebels would pull away with a 4 on 5th and keep it together for a 12-9 victory. Steve and Jeff were both perfect at the plate for the Rebels, as were Phil and Art for the Woodies. I think the Woodies will be just fine.
The next game was a fierce matchup between the Red Blue Jays and the Banshees. These teams went back and forth for the entire game, and finally the Banshees scored 3 runs in the bottom of the 7th to earn a tie. Dean Clark was the only one on the Jays that had perfect night, and he and Roddy both scored 3 runs in the game. From the Banshees dugout there was only one guy who didn't get 3 hits.
That brings us to the Wild, who earlier in the week killed the Grizzlies against Red Dogs, who had been hammered by the Beer brothers. In typical old Timers fashion, the Red Dogs won 12-6. Steve Brooks and Mike Candy were both perfect at the plate, and they both scored 2 runs. The Red Dogs scored the first 7 runs of the game before the Wild responded with 4 runs in the 3rd inning. That was as close as they would get to a very consistent Red Dogs team. I guess missing Francis Walsh was too big an obstacle to overcome.
Well, the Grizzlies were afforded a chance at redemption when they met the dog catchers, who were playing their first game. There was clearly a little winter rust left, as the first 5 Grizzly batters of the game got on unscored. Bob Smith helped solidify the infield, and Jerry did a great job in right. The dog catchers didn't bring their game this night, but they will be heard from before the season is over. Pistol Pete drove in the dog catcher's 2nd run with a nicely placed hit. There were a number of offensive stars for the Grizzlies, but Dave Doucette's 3-for-4 night with 3 runs scored was a crucial piece of the victory.
And our last game of the week saw the hurting units and dislocated joints play a make-up game caused by a rainout last week. The units seemed to be up to their old tricks, winning this game 17-11 to go to 2-0 on the season. O-Life scored another 3 runs in this game, while everyone named Paul on the team had 3 hits. Neil Pendelbury and Gary Bosso led the way for the Joints with 4 hits. So as near as I can tell, we have 5 teams that are yet to lose.
Yes, and 5 teams that are yet to win.
What do you think will happen first? Will there be no winless teams left, or no teams without losses? I'm going to say that everyone gets a win while someone is still undefeated.
Logic says you have it backward, but I'm going to go along with you. This just feels like an odd year.
Praise Jesus.
My mom told me to never hate anyone. But I'm making an exception with you. You're a pig.
All right, I'll let her know that.
I am Hawkeye the sports guy. Signing off and wishing you a great first week of the baseball season.
And I am going to drive this guy to the nut house if it kills me.